Good morning, everybody. Councilors, we're going to start. Welcome to meeting 20 of the Community Development and Recreation Committee. Welcome to members of the committee, of course, visiting councilors, and of course, members of the public. For those in the room with us, the screen at the back of the room provides real-time updates concerning where we are on the agenda and what's coming up next. And of course, you can follow the agenda and the debate on your computer, tablet, or smartphone at toronto.ca/council. I don't know if there are other ways to watch, maybe through osmosis or telepathy, but that's all we can offer at this point. Are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Hearing none. Confirmation of the minutes of April the 13th, 2017. Councillor Ford, all those in favor? Against? That is carried. So we have a list of speakers, and we will have a presentation. We've been asked for a presentation on item number 3. We have been asked for a 5-minute presentation synopsis of the report. So when we get to that item, if staff can do that, that'd be great. Item number 1, city support to boost Child and Youth Advocacy Center. I'd like to hold that because I just want to make a couple of comments. Item number 2, security of fire safety boxes. Move approval. All those in favor? Against? That's carried. As I mentioned, item 3 we would ask staff to do a brief presentation. Item 4 has a deputant, so we'll hold that item. Item number 5, update on the New Hope Shelter. Councillor Fletcher is holding that one. And item number 6, we also have a deputant, funding allocations for shelter and related services. Number 6 is being held. Number 7, Toronto Fire Services response to metrics data for stations 213 and 215. Approval? All those in favor? Against? That is carried. That's right, we have, I hope we have 2 items to add to the agenda. One is from Councillor Glenn de Bearmaker. The motion has been circulated. Motion to add this to the agenda. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And I also have a motion to add to the agenda regarding something that was embedded in the recent provincial budget regarding ethnocultural needs and our long-term care facilities. All those in favor of adding that to the agenda? Opposed? That is carried as well. Do you want to deal with them right now? Be happy to. Councillor de Bearmaker's motion. Councillor de Bearmaker, did you want this? Do you want to speak to this, or do you want to move it? And
no, I think if you move it, as
happy to move it. Okay, I'll take carriage of it if there's no objection. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And my motion regarding how we're going to divvy up the $50 million increase in funding to long-term care facilities for ethnocultural needs. We need a report back from city staff on what our share of that is going to be and how they're going to spend it. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item number 1, I'm the one who held it. City support to boost Child and Youth Advocacy Center. Are there any questions for staff? No. Any speakers other than me? Okay. I just wanted to just take a minute and thank staff for this report. This started off with a meeting from the Boost Child and Youth Advocacy Center Board of Directors coming to my office. They explained their story and the remarkable work they're doing to protect children and families in the city. They are looking to expand into other areas of the city, and we're simply asking for city staff to help them in that regard, and this is exactly what this report does. So I just want to commend Boost for the great work they're doing across the city. They have a very effective method for dealing with abuse and protecting children, an umbrella of different strategies under one roof that allows them to be very effective in not only support services and counseling, but working closely with police services in investigation. So with that, I would just simply like to thank Boost for visiting. They have deputed in the past. They visited with my office, and I'd like to thank staff for this report. And we look forward to only good news in helping them find a place to set up their operation. So right now we're moving receipt of the report. We're moving the recommendations. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. We have a deputant here who would like to speak on items 4 and 6. If it's the will of committee, we can certainly jump to those items so this person doesn't have to wait around for the balance of the agenda. The item number 4 is changes to the Toronto Employment and Social Services Orthopedic Benefits Operation Policy.
How's that going?
And
How's that going?
no. Florence Ludelay? Great, thank you very much for coming. You have 5 minutes.
It's Florence Lutali, and it's good to be able to come to this committee. I'm here to address 2 items. The first one is around shelter and related services that are affecting all wards and affecting me directly as a receiver of some of the services that we pay taxes into. And having lived being homeless and having lived being
We have a
poverty,
deputant, if we could keep it a little
I'd
more
like
quiet
to
in the room.
I'd like the city to be accountable for the monies that are invested in the city. Somehow, I haven't been able to receive any services around housing. Housing workers have not done a thorough job getting me housed. I've been evicted from my apartments, and Streets and Homes outreach workers have not really done a thorough job of getting me housed. Extremely out of the cold program, I asked our community to participate for us to get temporary housing. There's an enormous list of shelter-related services that had not been met. So I'm not too happy about that. We're funding a system that is not really trickling the money down to me as a homeless person and also as other homeless people living in the city, especially now Ward 27 and 28. The other aspect I'd like to address is the operational benefit policy that's probably going to be changed, that we request the funding to, and I don't know what the new changes are. I think that's about it. The service plan managers for the province haven't really worked on a thorough plan on getting us housed, and it's just the same bureaucracy, red tape going on for 10 years waiting for housing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for the deputant? Councillor Wong Tam?
Lawrence, can you just stay at the microphone? I just have a few questions for you. Thank you very much for your deputation. I want to have a better understanding. You are currently not housed, is that correct?
Right.
And you said Streets to Home has reached out to you, but have not been able to find suitable accommodations at this time.
Right. They got me rehoused. I got evicted under the At the Home study, and thereafter we had outreach program workers checking on my condition, but nothing was done.
And are you on any housing lists with the wait list for housing?
Yes.
And do you know what number you rank at?
I don't know what number I'm at right now.
How long have you been on that list for housing?
For a long time.
Do you remember the number of months or
Over 10
years?
years. Over 10 years.
Over 10 years.
Right.
Has anyone reached out to you to notify you on where you might be on that list?
No, because I also contacted the Ministry of Housing to ask them for a benefit supplement, and they wrote me a letter indicating that they'll be able to get in touch with me and let me know when my supplement will come in. So I haven't heard from them either. So somehow I feel that we're funding a system that is really not trickling down to the people that need the services. Even on a temporary short-term basis, we just have a lot of wasted money which is not being allocated to the individuals that need it. And the system is a little bit harder to navigate, a little bit complex, but in the end, I don't think it takes us 10 years to get housing, if not on a temporary basis.
May I ask, are you currently staying with friends, relatives? Where are you at the moment?
Currently, I'm still homeless. I have a temporary permanent address, which most homeless people don't always have a permanent address, which affects us in paying our property taxes. It affects us, our children going to public school. It affects all the things we do, working, getting suitable employment. It affects our well-being. So that's not good, having this endless crisis, waiting 10 years to get housing. It affects my health every day.
And while you're waiting for housing, what does your day look like?
What is my what?
What does your day look like while
My
you're...
day-to-day is like really paying attention to our priorities. Sometimes it's going to find the next toilet, sometimes it's going to find the next meal, sometimes it's taking care of my self-care. It varies on an individual, on a daily basis, and I don't feel that on any given day I have planned activities to do, because sometimes it changes. So me coming in here, I'd like the city to be really involved on a monthly basis of tracking all homeless people, those who stay in the shelters. At the end of the day, if you've been housed, the pink slip has to be given to the city, monies have to be paid, and long-term goals are you stay in the shelter for 3 months, 1 year, you get a service plan manager, you go to Queen's Park, they put a plan for you for where you'd like to live. And we cannot continuously invite our refugees and our families to come to a city that we love, but we can't take care of our own local residents in the city.
So I'm just going to ask you to speak a little bit closer to the microphone. I'm having some difficulty hearing you. Okay. I think what you're saying is very important. I have 2 final questions for you. You recognize that the City of Toronto is trying to build new shelter facilities and is running into some local community resistance from time to time who don't want these shelters in their neighborhoods. What message would you say to the city staff, and what message would you have to the local community that is not welcoming these new facilities and services?
I think housing, like all other things, there are 2 parts. One is public and one is private. An individual who's homeless should be able to go to the bank and say, this is the unit that I'd like. It's my choice to choose this unit. I'd like it repaired. I'd like people to know that I'm investing my money, my time, my friends, my local community members. We're going to be living in this unit for a long time. Vested interest, because I'm going to work here, I'm going to go to church, I'm going to go to school. I feel that it's very hard to go to the bank and say, okay, I've got vested private investment participation needs. That's one route. The other route is if it's not vested and it's a long-term goal, then there's public and can wait 10 years. The banks are very stingy to give us loans for even getting a lease to an apartment. It seems as though that the money we have is just sitting on a lame duck. Our talents are just buried in the ground and they're just really doing nothing for us as homeless people. We should have the options of using the finances of the city for a basic income if we want, or ODSP, or another source with private lender to live in the city. Somehow given this narrow-minded, one closed choice, which is not a good business investment for the city of Toronto.
Thank you. I've run out of time, but thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Wong Tam. Any other questions for the deputants? Ms. Latali, do we consider your deputation to cover both items 4 and 6?
I didn't know what the response. I didn't know what the response was on the orthopedic benefit policy. Has that been changed?
Well, I would have staff. When that comes up, we can ask staff. If you'd like to depute a second time, that's fine. Can we consider your current deputation for item 6?
Right.
Yes? Okay. All right, so thank you very much.
Okay.
Questions for staff? Number 6. Councillor Mahevik?
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate this report. I have a few questions that go in a variety of directions. The chart in the appendix, there isn't a category, and there hasn't historically been one, but I'm wondering whether we need to put one in, and that would be flex capacity. So, there's a standard amount, just to take the first one, Christie Ossington Men's Hostel, bed capacity of 68. Some of these places also have flex capacity, and would not it be wise to say that, when we do go, frankly, beyond the 90, that we are able to understand where folks can go and also have that kind of understanding with the sites that could have flex capacity? I guess Mary Ann's answer.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. We do know that internally. We don't report it in the spreadsheet that's put here, but we do know where we have that capacity if it's needed.
Could we get a note on that?
Yeah, I can
Or
look into
something that could frankly be forwarded to council as it makes its as part of a communication. I could put that in the form of a motion as well. Because I think it would be good for council to understand that we have 3,000-ish beds. And then we have a flex capacity of, say, I don't know, just for fun, 300, which gives us a flex capacity of 10% in the event of a particular cold winter, and that they can be done in these establishments, and you have an arrangement with each of these establishments when those conditions are met, and you have that budget that was allocated in the last time, and then it's a more kind of thoughtful way to go, and for council and the public to understand that we've actually thought through this.
So, Councillor Mahevik, all those things will be considered in our winter readiness report in the fall, where we've been asked to report back around occupancy and capacity. So we would address exactly those issues in that report.
But in the short term, a report to council on flex capacity in each of these places could be identified?
We could share the information with council before that. I don't think we'll be able to get it before council before the recess, but we could certainly share that information through other means of communication. Okay.
I'll put a motion together on that. Next question is these are the beds that we contract out to other not-for-profit agencies. How many beds do we have internal that are run by City of Toronto?
We operate 10 shelters and about 1,500 beds.
So the number that we should say when we're out there is 4,500 beds, more or less?
That's correct.
Okay. So here's a, do these contracts are basically more or less roll over what we have already committed to in previous years? Is that right?
More or less, that's correct.
And do we account for inflation?
We did include a 2% increase for 2016. It's typically something that we consider on a biannual basis, so it's certainly something that we're looking at as we prepare our 2018 budget.
So it's how about for 2016/7? Do they get a 2% increase as well?
No, that was strictly for 2016. We didn't seek an increase in 2017.
I see. So here's the other issue, and it has been addressed here a number of times, is, you know, our staff, and I'm all good with that. Our 1,500 staff are frankly adequately compensated, but on the not-for-profit side, it's hardly worth getting an MSW or social work or social work degree because you basically can't really get decent employment in the not-for-profit sector. And historically, it's only been getting worse. It's great if you're in a city system, but it's terrible if you're in a not-for-profit system. Should we, not you, well, Royal We, be addressing that as an issue?
We will be addressing that in our 2018 budget ask.
How about 2017, 2%?
I don't think we have the ability to do anything for 2017 at the moment because the budget's already been approved.
It'll come forward. Okay, so what would the difference in salaries be between, say, a frontline worker, say, in a Seton House versus a frontline worker in, say, a Fred Victor?
I'm going to ask my colleague Glenn Morgan to respond to that.
Through the chair to the councillor, I think it's important to remember too that this is not the only revenue source that the POSs would get. They do have the ability to raise money through donations and other means.
I'm aware of that.
But as far as the salary differential, we would have to analyze that and do a survey to see exactly what the disparity is.
So you don't have a number?
We do get submissions, but they're done more on an aggregate basis of what the salaries are and how many FTEs are employed by that. But if you're asking for position by position, it's really on a case-by-case basis.
So you don't have numbers?
No, we do not.
Okay, thank you. Mr.
Thank you, Councillor Mihevc. Councillor Wong-Tam and then Councillor Ford.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to ask, with respect to the existing facilities that we have, has there been any work undertaken by the service provider or the city about expansion of facilities on site, simply because we're having such a difficult time finding new sites?
We did do a call out to providers looking for additional beds. I don't think at that time we were looking for capital enhancements to buildings. We were just looking at ways to increase capacity within existing buildings.
And should we be trying to do it in a systematic fashion, that we do a physical assessment, whether it's a service provider or perhaps the city who's actually funding those services, start taking a look at whether or not we can expand those facilities on site? Because I think if there are ways to find opportunities, we've got to get going. Is that something that staff will support? Is that something that we should be doing?
Through the chair to the councillor, we did get a motion at the last CDRC by yourself about looking at the space of each shelter for situations of overcrowding. And during that analysis, we would also look at the general space of the facility itself to see if it is conducive of expansion.
Oh, so that's going to be done through that motion? Oh, that's good, so that, that's fantastic, so it actually unlocks something else. But when, will that help us, I mean, with respect to the delivery time and coming back to this committee, will we be able to do it in a timely fashion? Like, obviously, you know, to go system-wide, it takes a great amount of time, but if we can report back as we need to, when the available information is ready, are we able to do that as well?
Through the chair to the councillor, we do consider this urgent, and we are trying to do a blitz. It is early days for us to coordinate this effort, but we're trying to look for not just the space within the facility, but also the entire property as well. We think it would be killing two birds with one stone, if you will, to look at potential expansion within the property, and that would give us a better idea of when we put together a more wholesome plan going forward.
And then finally, the investigation for existing space and opportunities for expansion, that's not just for permanent beds, but also the introduction of additional flex beds, is that correct? Because if it doesn't meet the shelter standards, you're still looking for flex bed opportunities.
We're looking for all opportunities.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wong-Tam. Councillor Ford?
Thank you. My question is through the chair to staff. Just specifically on 3A, the increase in extension for quality hotel and suites. So when is this being increased from?
Through the chair to the councillor, this was a hotel that we engaged in very quickly for the refugees. The original contract was, I think, $300,000.
Okay, so that would be at 2.3 million for the same, or I guess in total?
That is correct. We would open up the contract, and that would be the target limit. It doesn't necessarily mean that we would use all of it, but it does give us the flexibility of continuing operations there as needed.
Right. So, and then my next question was, why was it this specific hotel? Did we look at other options?
In this case, this particular hotel had experience with the earlier Syrian refugee use, and because of their experience, we felt it was a good continuation.
Right, but we haven't looked at anyone else.
Through the chair to council, yes, we did.
Okay.
We looked at a number of hotels. We liked that location because we were already situated there, and the logistics made it a lot easier and efficient for us.
Right. And is this just one certain location or multiple locations across the city?
Through the chair to the councillor, this is, in particular, this would be the one location, but the second group that is mentioned in the other recommendations, they have a number of properties.
Right, okay. And in 2016, what was, how do I frame this question? How many refugees were in need of a hotel room?
Through the chair to the councillor, in 2016, I believe we were less than 10% overall, and now the number has climbed upwards of 25%. We didn't need anything beyond the hotels that we were using already, but this year we do.
Right. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Ford. Any other questions for staff? Other than me? No? I just have a couple of quick ones. Hotel rooms, provide an essential opportunity for a quick fix to overcrowding, but hotel rooms have some limitations with a lack of cooking, playgrounds. How do we service that need to have kids in I guess, a play area, a safe play area, and how do we feed our residents in our various hotel rooms?
Through you, Mr. Chair, when we contract with a hotel, the contracting covers both accommodation and food. And we have been working with our partners in PF&R to talk about recreational opportunities for children.
Now, hotels also aren't always near transit. How do we get people who have been turned down at one shelter, there's a lack of capacity, and send them to a hotel? Are they given cab money, or do we drive them there, or what's the plan?
Yes, we make both taxis and transit fare available to people who need to move between shelters.
And as far as the exit date is concerned, what is the City of Toronto's shutdown date for hotel usage? When do we tell people they have to leave?
We don't. We allow people to stay until we work with them to secure housing. So, and it really depends on the individual circumstance, how long that takes. What we're finding with refugees, that on average, they are in those hotels for about 3 months, which allows them enough time to secure documentation and do a housing search and move into housing.
You think within 90 days most can be placed?
Our experience up to this point, so far this year, is that is how long it's taking for people to move through that system.
Okay. And I know you may not be able to answer this question. It's regarding schooling for the kids, school-age children. How does the school board determine its catchment area when they're temporarily in hotels, and how do they place them in local schools?
So that's part of the work that our staff do with families, and all of the children that are living at our hotels are registered in school and receiving schooling. If they were to move, just like any other family, we would do a transfer, or that family would do a transfer to another home school.
So the address of the hotel would determine the catchment area?
Yes, that's correct.
I guess the downside to that is they would really have to they could have to change schools within 3 months.
They may have to.
Yeah, okay.
There's also the option for the parent to keep them in the school until the end of the school year, or a typical break. So it's up to each family to figure out what works.
Optional attendance. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Speakers.
Ready, but so I appreciate us going someplace else. And I want to check it with staff as well.
Yeah, we have had a late request for a deputant on this matter. So if we could, with the wish of committee, if we could vary procedure slightly and let Jeff Panzer speak. Thank you, Mr. Panzer. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. I think that the McLaughlin Planetarium should be turned into a homeless shelter. I think if City Council can spend $1 billion on a rail deck park, that hopefully you could spend $100,000 on sprucing up the McLaughlin Planetarium to make it a place where people could stay overnight. I think we have a tremendous crunch as far as the shelter system, that the workers there are doing their best, but it's overwhelming as far as providing a place to stay overnight for those people who are poor enough to need a shelter. And so I'm hoping that because it is centrally located, that it's something that could be done. That's it. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions for the deputant? No? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councilor Havoc, is your motion ready? You need a few more minutes. Any other speakers? Okay. Any other speakers on this item? If not, we can hold it down. Okay. All right, well, why don't we jump back to item 4, changes to Toronto Employment and Social Services Orthopedic Benefits Operational Policy, my favorite issue. Questions for staff? I just have one. If you could just briefly outline the results of your consultation with the third-party stakeholders who were advocating for a revision of the policy. I think last time this was here, we asked that both city officials and the stakeholders get together to try and work out a compromise. If you could let us know what the results of that meeting were, and whether they can be found in this report anywhere.
Through the chair, thank you very much. We did have an extensive consultation. It lasted about 2.5 hours. We explored the common interests between Toronto Employment and Social Services and the association, and we tried to clarify what the role of this particular benefit was within the context of Ontario Works. They really presented us with a lot of information around different health plans, and we tried to clarify that this really is not a health plan because we couldn't possibly provide health coverage for this particular need or other needs within the context of Ontario Works. We also tried to explain the context in which we could provide this benefit and contrasted it with other healthcare benefits. Their interest is really around a recognition of their association. They did indicate to us that they have no financial interest because they didn't feel that they could provide the benefit within the cost structure of Ontario Works. We really tried to examine at the end whether what they had presented to us would really impact our organization in terms of our ability to manage these claims and to be a responsible steward of the provincial funding, and also whether it was impacting access to orthotic services for our social assistance clients. We have no evidence, nor did they present any evidence, that there were issues of access for our clients. So on that basis, we have tabled this new report.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions for staff? No? Speakers? No? I would simply say that I would thank staff for their amount of time on this. I can tell you the third-party stakeholders were not happy at the final result, but we did invest an enormous amount of time and effort, and at this point we'll rely on the expertise of staff. If they want to come back at a later date and have it reviewed a year or so from now, I think we're open to it, but right now what's before you will remain as city policy. We're moving receipts on this report. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. We're going to jump back to item number 3, State of Accessible Recreation Capital Projects and Services. A request has been made for a brief presentation from staff. There has been a handout to committee members, if you want to follow that along.
I can maybe, Mr. Chair, just introduce the presentation. Howie Dayton, Director of Community Recreation, and Daniel McLaughlin, Manager on our Capital Projects branch, are going to both present together.
Oh, is there a reason why it wasn't?
I don't know, so I'm just going to ask
want to add it?
Yes. No, it's got to come. I'm going to defer it to Jim because nobody has a report here, so it'll come in Jim.
Okay, do you want to add it and then defer it? What do you want to do? Sure.
I'm just going to note that it's here and ask that it be on the June.
Good morning.
Thank you very much. I understand the request has been for 10 minutes. Is that enough time?
Through the chair, it'll be enough time. Good morning through the chair to members of committee and everyone in attendance. Daniel and I are pleased to present the State of Accessible Recreation, Capital Projects and Services. I'm just getting my notes out here. Okay, so the purpose of the report was to provide an update on the state of accessible recreation programming as had been requested by Community Development and Recreation Committee. And the report outlines progress that we've made in areas such as outreach, communication, programming, and partnerships since the completion of the divisional study conducted in 2008 titled Getting Services Right. This report summarizes the progress that we've made in meeting requirements under the Accessibility for Ontarians with the Disabilities Act, otherwise known as AODA, including the division's capital investments to improving the accessibility in recreational facilities.
Investments in accessibility. So Toronto is a national leader in accessible municipal recreation. Each year, we're spending more than $1.5 million on equipment, staffing, and resources to ensure our programs are accessible. Since 2005, we've dedicated specifically more than $18 million in capital investment to reducing barriers to recreation. We've done that in approximately 400 facilities and carried out these investments through multiple funding streams. In our 2018 to 26 capital plan, we plan to spend more than $13 million more on accessible specific projects. Our programs are also developed in partnership with other organizations that bring hundreds of thousands of dollars of in-kind resources to our programs and projects each year. The $32 million in specific accessibility investment that's been spent or is planned to be spent across the 21 years from 2005 to 2026 is guided by a number of key documents, legislation, and framework. First and foremost being the Accessibility of Ontarians with Disabilities Act, which drives our investments and provides a strategic framework for what work needs to be completed and when. And these are being incorporated into current projects. The AODA requires organizations to develop, implement, and enforce standards for accessibility related to goods, services, facilities, employment, accommodation, and buildings. The target date for this is no later than January 2025, and PF&R have a mandate to look for all opportunities to upgrade our facilities for accessibility. Now, compliance with AODA does not require that all facilities be fully accessible by 2025, but expects that a plan is in place by this time, and that all new facilities and major renovations adhere to these standards. Now, in response to what a frequent question that I get is, what is it going to cost to get us to where we need to be? In the report, it mentions that to make all of our facilities fully accessible costs approximately $60 million. This kind of quick, one-time redevelopment of facilities is not required, and it's not what is envisioned by the Act. PF&R has a multi-year accessibility plan for upgrading barrier-free access in parks and facilities, and these are governed by the Ontario Building Code and the AODA Design for Public Spaces standards that apply to all major renovations and new facility construction. Accessibility upgrades are being funded through PF&R capital budget in a specific accessibility account, and they're also funded through major renovation projects and incorporated into our State of Good Repair program. We continue to improve barrier-free accessibility as a component of all construction and renovation projects, and through this multi-part strategy, that proactively advances capital investment while leveraging all other capital projects to improve accessibility, we will not only meet the requirements of the Act, we will continue to lead in terms of accessible recreation.
On the service side, since 2008, or between 2008 to 2015, both our adapted and integrated programs have increased our capacity to serve persons with disability who require additional support and recreation programs. In particular, the adopted programming has increased from 169 to 519 programs during that period, which accommodate an increased registration that went from 1,387 to 3,400 registrations in 2015. In our integrated programs, which provide one-on-one support to persons requiring it in recreation programs, we served 704 clients in 2015, which is also an increase and is primarily found to be in our general programs, aquatics, and summer camps. In terms of funding, we've provided $1.593 million in our base operating budget, which allows us to provide both staff, equipment, training, and to ensure that we're able to engage and consult with our advisory committee through our advocate for people with disabilities. We recognize that we can't do it alone. We have a number of significant partnerships. We work with agencies who themselves deliver service, help to refer families, and also help to build our capacity in terms of training and recruitment. So this is just on the slide a small sampling of the many organizations that we work with. We also engage and consult, as I mentioned earlier, to ensure that services policies and capital planning address the needs of persons with disabilities. So we have the Parks, Forestry and Recreation Community Disability Steering Committee, as well as we consult with the City of Toronto's Accessibility Advisory Committee. Both of these committees are invaluable in terms of the advice that they give us, and I know some members are here today, and I want to acknowledge their participation in the development of this report. So the question around increased demand has been raised as well. That's a question that I get a lot. So how many people are waiting for service? So this slide gives you a sense of what we call the unique clients that are waiting for service, i.e. The individuals who are one time waiting for service as opposed to being able to list themselves on multiple waiting lists, which sometimes shows a much larger number. So either way, we recognize that there is a demand for additional service, but we want to also acknowledge that 70% of clients who are waiting for service are receiving some level of service in our adopted programming, and 78% are receiving some level of service in our integrated programs. So, those are folks who say, I'd like some more service, I'd like some more support. So we recognize that, and our challenge is to continue to try and find strategies of meeting that additional demand over time. So in terms of how to do that, we look at that as a multi-pronged approach. There's a number of factors that go into service planning and increasing service levels, which, as you can see, we've done since 2008 to 2015, which has allowed us to increase our programs and serve more clients. So this is a continuation of that effort, and we will continue to undertake that effort. But it does require a few key things. One would be the recruitment and training of staff who are required to provide support at the front line. There's also a need to ensure that we have the specialized equipment required to accommodate persons within the various recreational programs that they may wish to take. There's, of course, the need for appropriate physical space to deliver those programs, and there's the need for program spaces, because particularly in our integrated programs, that's about participating within our programs that are themselves maybe full with waiting lists. So as I say, it's a multi-pronged approach, but we have continued strategies in terms of looking at our capacity and trying to maximize those capacities over time. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. I have Councillor Ford on the list for questions for staff, and then Councillor Wong-Tam, Councillor Ford, and then Councillor Fletcher. Councillor Wong-Tam, Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff, actually, a lot of my questions were answered as we're going along. So I'm just trying to look here. So I've met with a few families about accessibility issues for their kids, specifically, and what programs does the city have? Specifics. So we spend 1.6 million roughly on programming. What do those programs look like, and what type of programming is that?
So there's two primary types of programs that are in our, what we call our adopted and integrated service area. Adopted programming would be specialized programming for persons with special needs who perhaps require a more complex level of support than can be provided in an integrated setting, i.e. an activity camp that's located at a community center. A person with special needs through an intake process may wish to have their child in that program to be able to integrate with others in the community, which is great. And we then provide one-on-one support for approximately 2 weeks of summer camp, or one program session per season, i.e. fall, winter, spring. And then we try and accommodate through adopted equipment or adopted programming within the integrated setting to make that a successful experience. But where that integration isn't feasible, we discuss with the family adopted programmings, which are specialized, lower ratios. They still provide the same type of programming, could be crafts, could be trips, could be swimming, but we're able to accommodate some of the more complex needs that we can't do in an integrated setting. We offer those in the fund guide, so they go through the normal registration channels, but we ask them to identify that their child or they themselves have a special need, and then we have staff who do an intake assessment with them, visit their home, talk to them about what their needs are, and to make sure that we match them with a one-on-one worker or provide them with the right program environment.
Okay, and how many specially trained staff do we have across the city for that?
I would have to get the number of recreation workers that are working in that unit, so I'd have to get back to you with that.
Okay.
Through the chair, if I can just add, we do have specialized staff, full-time staff that organize and facilitate these programs as well in a small centralized unit that just focuses on programs for people with disabilities. So they're a centralized unit that plan these programs and then liaise with a number of staff out in the field as well.
And so the communications of that and the outreaches, our staff are very adaptive. They can go out, meet with the family, and see how we can integrate.
Yeah, so it's done through a couple of ways. So staff will do that, as I say, where families identify. We promote the availability of programs quite readily, and Toronto's a leader in this regard, so families do pursue these services. But as I mentioned, we work in concert with a number of agencies that help to refer families, so we let those agencies know about what's available, and then we have online information and as well through our committees.
Mm-hmm. And I guess the cost of these programs through these agencies, I assume they are heavily subsidized.
So the agencies may deliver their own service. That's they're self-sustaining, and they may deliver their own service. With respect to parks and recreation programs, some of our programs have user fees attached through, because they're delivered at, if you're attending a summer camp, you would pay the cost of summer camp, but the integration worker is covered through our budget, so we don't ask parents to pay for that integration worker. The adopted programming has its own user fee schedule. Council approves those fees through the user fee bylaw, and then we also deliver programs at the free centers. Those have no fees attached, and the other point is that families are eligible to use welcome policy in accordance with city-approved policy.
Right. And then your 20-year plan, that started in 2005 and going to 2025. So where are we within that? So we're 12 years in. Are we on schedule? Have we been meeting that, our objectives?
So what we've been seeing is, or what we've been achieving, is a incremental improvement in all of our facilities. Right. For every capital project that we're carrying out, accessibility is one of the highest priorities for work that's being done. So in every project that we plan, our staff are focused on accessibility, our designers are focused on accessibility, so the work that we're doing results in much improved accessibility, and therefore we are meeting with the obligations.
Right, and that's with the capital projects.
Capital projects.
Programming, where do we see ourselves by 2025?
Well, I mean, we're continuing to meet all of the requirements under 8OA. We did a number of changes to with how we deliver customer service, information. So it's a multi-pronged approach. We've got an approved accessibility plan that we continue to move forward. With respect to service delivery, you know, I would say that we're there. I mean, we provide the services, we provide the support. It's just a question of how much service and how much support, you know, folks want and how much need there's going to be over time and our ability to meet that.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ford. Councillor Wong-Tam.
Yes, thank you very much, and through you, Mr. Chair. Regarding the $60 million that's identified to upgrade every single recreation facility, that is not the requirement of AODA, correct?
It is, sorry, Councillor?
It is?
Sorry, I couldn't hear that last part of your question.
Sorry, the AODA requirements to have new facilities and existing major renovations of existing facilities updated to be AODA compliant. The $60 million that you've identified, that captures making every single facility right now in the inventory of the City of Toronto AODA compliant, but that is not the AODA requirement, is that correct?
That is correct.
So when you identify that it requires $60 million to bring every single facility up to date, what was the intention of that information if it's not required by AODA?
So, and let me clarify, sorry, through the chair, let me clarify that that's what the cost will be if we were to do it today. But we're not required to do it. And even by 2025, there will be some of our facilities that are not fully accessible because the requirement is that we have a plan in place, that we know what we're going to be doing with it. So the $60 million is actually the cost that's going to go beyond 2025.
So
That just, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead,
That just
please.
identifies kind of the scale of magnitude of what we're looking at. But then again, it's funded already through various means and various sources within our plan. So as time goes by, we'll adjust depending on what the demands are.
And thank you. I think that's very helpful. Given the fact that we have a population that's aging, at some point in time, each and every single one of us will be living with some form of disability. The objective from your division is to ensure that into the future, whether it's 2025 and beyond, is to incorporate inclusive design, to make sure every single service is going to be fully integrated, that it will be adapted, that regardless of who you are and what you live with the range of abilities or disabilities, is that you can participate. Is that my understanding?
And through the chair, your understanding is correct.
My understanding is correct. Thank you. Thanks for correcting that. And so with respect to the wait list that you described, can you unpack that for me in terms of the type, the quantum of the number of people on the adapted recreation programs that are on the wait list, and what you anticipate it to be, given the fact that we have an aging population, what that may be through integrated services or the accommodation services, and if you don't have that information, can you get that information to us in the future?
Through the chair, so the report identifies what the actual quantum is with respect to adapted and integrated programs in terms of wait lists. So that would be the total number of persons waiting for adapted programming in 2016 was 343, as an example, and in our integrated programming it's 110. So as I said, that can be individuals who are waitlisted for multiple programs within the same season. And it could be individuals who are looking for multiple services in our integrated area, So it's important to distill that to unique clients so we get a sense of what is the order of magnitude with respect to demand. And then it's a policy discussion around weeks of service that we're able to provide based on the funding that we have. So that is how we look at the adopted and integrated. On the aging population side, I think there's other ways that we get at delivering programs that are responsive to the physical and other special needs that our clients may have. And that's around the types of program design that we have and the intensity of program and the facilities in which we have those programs located in, because there's might be other ways of accommodating persons who may just want to come in for a drop-in program or a lane swim or that sort of thing, and making sure that we have the types of services and supports there for them, that they don't end up on a wait list.
So the wait list for recreation overall, we have a very large number that's been floating about. Will you be able to unpack and disaggregate all the different types of services that people are waiting for based on their service needs requirement?
Yeah, that's the intention, and we're reporting back to council just on what our true wait lists are within our key program areas, and then what are some strategies that we're undertaking to address that demand.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wong-Tam. Councillor Fletcher?
Yes, I just, as far as the kind of physical requirements are concerned for buildings, rec buildings and parks, what would you say the main upgrades would be to make those accessible? Is it elevators? Is it hoists into pools? Is it pathways, swing sets? Do you have kind of a list of those things that?
So through the chair, all of the above.
All of the above.
Now, I would say that the items that are kind of the highest price ticket items will be where we have to install an elevator. There are a few sites that we have identified that that's the type of upgrade that will be required to make the facility accessible on all levels. In our playground program, we're always looking to improve accessibility, not only of the play equipment and the playground itself, but of the approach to the playground to make sure that both the users and caregivers have a full accessibility to those kind of assets as well.
So a community center or a facility that has an elevator, would you have a percentage? I mean, that's pretty important to move around the building if you're physically impaired. What percentage do you think have an elevator, or we're still trying to get to that?
Through the chair, unfortunately, I don't have those stats off the top of my head, Councillor, but I can provide you with that information.
That would be great. And accessibility in parks, of course, we're looking at playgrounds, but also for anybody to be able to move through that park and enjoy our beautiful sites. So pathways, is that pretty significant?
Yeah, through the chair, yeah. We're undergoing an assessment right now of approximately 170 odd kilometers of trails through parks, and that's to determine where we're able to make improvements to accessibility so that that information can be made available to the public to be able to plan their outings in those parks.
So this report is here at this committee. I don't know if it's also going to go to the Parks and Environment Committee, because the parks piece and the accessibility in parks is something I'm sure they're very interested in. I guess I could ask the general manager if she thought about that.
Just through the chair, we didn't include a lot of the parks information in this report just because it was specifically directed around recreation information, but we can do a similar report focusing on parks accessibility to the Parks and Environment Committee with the same type of information around what the plan is in the parks area.
So these dollars, the investment dollars, are not parks capital, it's simply rec capital, facility capital.
Through the chair, that's correct, Councillor. These are for facilities.
Thank you.
Through the chair, I would just add, when you include the parks dollars in it, the number is much, much larger.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. Any other questions for staff before I ask a couple? Just for clarity's sake, when we have a fully operational, safe, and relatively new playground set, is our approach to augment that with fully accessible play items or play facilities, or is our approach to tear it all down and build new? And what are our legal obligations?
Our obligations at this point are to construct playgrounds that meet accessibility design guidelines. And that means that there has to be an accessible approach, circulation areas, and approximately 25% of the equipment that's in the playground would be accessible. It has to have an accessible play surface as well.
So an existing playground set can stay as is, and if we augment that with fully accessible...
That's correct. Then we'd be compliant. So these sites are assessed individually because of, there are relatively no two that are exactly the same across the city out of our approximately 900 playground sites. So they're assessed individually and dealt with that way. In some cases, we're able to augment by adding additional equipment or improving circulation space. In others, it requires that they be rebuilt completely.
So...
Through the chair, if I can just add, I think the largest volume of work around accessibility is done when we actually replace playgrounds. And so through our playground replacement program, when these playgrounds are now designed and installed, they are designed with the new AODA information as well as the city's own design specifications, which actually exceed the AODA requirements. So the best sort of improvement we see is when we do full playground replacements rather than augmenting little pieces of it at a time.
That's actually an excellent segue to my next question. When we allocate funds to local school boards through Section 37 and public access agreement, are we assuming that they will adhere to AODA requirements, or do we have to embed that in the agreements?
Through the chair, my understanding is that any organization is required to be compliant with the new legislation, and I believe Mr. Schreiner may want to contribute to that.
Mr. Chairman, any playground, any manufacturer of the playgrounds in Canada have to build to the CSA standards that were adopted in 2007. And since that time, the playgrounds do meet that accessibility component that you were asking about. So as long as the school board is installing a playground that is CSA approved, theoretically, it should be meeting that criteria.
And the same rules, I assume, for developers who also may be responsible under a development agreement to build a play set nearby as well.
You are correct.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much. That's it for my questions. Go to speakers. Councillor Wong Tam.
Yes, thank you. I want to thank staff for the report. I recognize that you're sort of letting us know what is the volume of work that lays ahead for the city, what your division is doing to make sure that we are going to be AODA compliant. Sorry, I do have a motion, if I can just place it on the screen. Sorry, it's a fairly straightforward motion. I can't see it being controversial. It's just a request that there will be an updated report or similar to updated report be provided to the Toronto Accessibility Advisory Committee at their September meeting, and also to have staff report back to this committee on further analysis and details around the wait list in a disaggregated form. We want to be able to make sure that when you report back on the sort of citywide recreational needs and the wait list, that we unpack the information so we have a better idea of what those who are within the accessibility community, what their needs are. Just because I suspect that it will probably bring a lot of attention to the overall city deficits on service, but with respect to those living with different abilities, I think that it would be really great for them to have and for us as well, to have a snapshot of what it is that community is looking for, and then how do we actually work towards reducing that gap. So that's all that is. But I want to thank you for all the work. And also just to mention the fact that the City of Toronto has a Toronto Accessibility Design Guideline. It has served us very well. It goes much deeper and much further than anything that's contained in the AODA. The AODA was actually a really good act to force all municipalities and all governments in Ontario to think about what our responsibilities and roles are, including those in the private sector. But the city has already been doing a phenomenal job, I think, of trying to provide accessible services, especially in the field of recreation. And we don't really we don't really take some time to acknowledge the good work that is happening, and there is a lot of good work that is underway. So I want to thank staff for all that they've done, because you really are truly leading the way, not just in Ontario, but really in Canada. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Wong Tam. Any other speakers?
I will.
Yes, Councillor Fletcher.
I will just echo that really forward-thinking approach that exists within the department, and how I believe that every single project is overlaid with a really clear accessibility lens, and that particularly in the facilities, it's for people with disabilities. I'm looking at the number of elevators that there may or may not be in different facilities. It's important for those folks that have a disability, they're in a wheelchair, some other device, but it's also really important for seniors and the elderly. They have walkers, they have many things in order to move around in our facility. And noting that, I think for the first time, there's more seniors than anything in the country, so that's also going to be reflected in Toronto. So how important some of those things are. There's also a number of kind of easy fixes that I don't know how many we have. Hoists for swimming pools. It's if we could buy some of those with our section money, as it's called. Very few pools have that ability to get in with a hoist for people that are disabled, even though they can get to the side of the pool. Getting into the pool is another fact. And I'm very familiar with Monarch Park Pool, which was one of the very few pools in the city that has that. So thinking about people getting into the water, which of course, when you're disabled, is such a freeing thing. People say getting into the water and being able to move on your own is incredibly important. So I'm just flagging that's something we don't always think about, or those types of things. People always are asked for the swings, accessible swings. They're very popular, and I think so many swing sets now include that. And the community are asking for that. People with children that need those swings are asking, and the community is very, very supportive of that. And because I'm not on the Parks Committee, and I think they'd be very interested in this, actually, to see how we're doing that. But I just have to really thank staff for all of the thoughtfulness around when we're upgrading anything, including a dog park. Well, now there's a cement piece for people to go on their wheelchair so they can bring their dog into the dog park. Little things like that that make life easy and all of our facilities accessible. Aren't that expensive, but they go a long, long way to a great city. So I want to echo the thanks that Councillor Wong Tam's already given staff.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. Any other speakers to this item? No? We have the one motion. If we can put that on the screen, I hope everyone's taking a look at it. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. We'll go to item 5. Councillor Fletcher, you held update on New Hope Shelter.
I did, but just before I do that, I just wanted to note, and Deputy City Manager, I don't want to use a point of privilege here, but there was to be a report here, Mr. Chair, on Toronto District School Board's shared use agreement for recreation spaces in schools was to be at May, and also the one on the working group for the S.H. Armstrong pool. But I understand that they'll both be on the June agenda. So I'm fine with that. I've had that cleared up. Thank you. I just have some questions of staff on this one. I think Councillor McMahon wanted to be here. If she's listening, we're on that item. And the New Hope Shelter, I don't know if everybody has received that letter, which is the update on the New Hope Shelter from the chair and members of our Community Liaison Committee, signed by all of the members. It's in the agenda. So I just want to ask the shelter staff, we've been at the Community Liaison, and one of the things that the Community Liaison Committee is doing at the New Hope Shelter is advising the departments, SSHA and SDFA, on their expectations, giving us advice on the implementation of the motion that was made when we approved the Hope Shelter. Is that right?
Yes, it is, Councillor.
And there's quite a few people on that. It's a very representative committee for the CLC.
Yes, it is.
You're not at that, are you?
No, no.
Costanza is at that. So you've been at that committee, and there's, it's widely representative of neighbors. There's some school groups. There's the principal from up the street, the Catholic school, the parent councils, and adjacent neighbors. So they're very clear on welcoming the Hope Shelter into the community. I think they are. But they're also clear on things that they believe that they would like to see in order to make the shelter successful. Am I correct in laying it out like that? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Through the chair to the councillor, yes, you are correct. The committee is very representative of the community. They have been working with city staff, and at not the last meeting, but the previous meeting, we did report to them on the motions that were adopted by council regarding developing an action or strategy plan to support the integration of the shelter into the community. Staff did meet with other city divisions to come up with an action plan, as well as with the AOCs and as well as with the community health partners. And that plan was presented to the Community Liaison Committee, which is attached to this report, and it was endorsed by the Community Liaison Committee. They were quite happy to see some of the actions, and some of them are in progress in terms of being implemented. For example, the community safety audit is being planned for June. There was discussion about the design of the shelter, the exterior, also the name. The Community Liaison Committee is going to have some input in terms of the name. So there are a number of actions that are underway.
And in the report that you have here, page 6, of the estimate, the resource requirements, because that was one of the things you presented to the community at one of the CLC meetings. And Apple Grove has identified, in order to assist in programming, they've identified 2 things they could do: recreation, leisure programming, and offer life skills as well as part of that, right?
That's correct.
And then in the motion, very clearly, there was some park upgrades that were required. Those are being looked at, but we don't have a number for that yet. But is that still something that we understand is going to be part of the implementation of the shelter into the community? Particularly, it's Maple Leaf Forever Park right beside it, and also Leslie Grove. Do you have numbers yet from parks? Yes?
You, Mr. Chair. Yes, we do. We have them as of about 2 days ago.
Okay, so...
I'd be happy to meet with you, discuss.
Thank you.
We're talking.
And the library is looking to do something, but it looks like it's local shelter programs. This is not just devoted to the Hope Shelter, but it actually would be East End shelters, quite a number of them. What would the discrete cost be for the Hope Shelter, or are we putting this in a larger ask for a number of shelters?
Through the chair to the councillor, my understanding is that this is a pilot project that they have already initiated, and they would like to extend it to the Hope Shelter at a cost of, I believe, I don't have it quite in front of me, of $106,000 that they will be putting forward in their next budget ask. But right now, my understanding specifically for the Hope Shelter. There are other shelters that we're looking at, and they are going to get back to us. We've asked them if they are also planning to expand that program to the other new shelters, and they're going to get back to us with that information.
So that might include the East End, East Toronto, the Birchmount Shelter that we've approved.
That's correct. We're waiting to hear if that's the case.
And some other ones, okay. And then we're looking at the cost of the hydro for upgraded lighting. And that's, Hydro's been out for quite a few walks and looked at that. They don't have a number quite yet.
That's correct. And they'll be working with our transportation division regarding that.
And then you acknowledge that they felt that it was premature and not a wise decision to have closed off swimming programs to the Hope Shelter in easy walking distance, and have signed a letter, sent it to the community, asking to reconsider the swim program at S.H. Armstrong.
Through the chair, that's correct. And at the CLC meeting, the resident representatives did raise that issue with us and asked us to include it in the staff report, and that they were going to be sending letters to the committee. So that was discussed.
And so we have that. And it was also signed by the Salvation Army representative who's going to be running the shelter. Is that right?
I believe so.
Bradley Harris, he's signed that. So it's not only the community, but also the Salvation Army that thinks that would be a great resource for the new clients. If that's in there, yes?
Yes.
And that's good. Thank you very much.
Any other questions for staff? Speakers?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I have a motion. That this would report to the June 7th, 2017 Community Development and Recreation Committee meeting with the estimated cost of the following items identified in Table 1. The Parks, Forestry, and Recreation activity, park revitalization opportunities, conducting site visits to determine future options, budget unfunded to be determined, Division Agency, Transportation Services, cost to enhance Toronto lighting in the area around 29 Leslie Street to be determined, and B, the cost reinstating recreational swimming at S.H. Armstrong Pool for the New Hope Shelter residents and the community. Or is that, yeah. I'm not sure which one is up there. Yeah. So that would be the cost of those things to come back to the June 7th meeting of CDR. And I'll speak to that. When the New Hope Shelter was approved last year in 2016, there were a whole number of, I won't call them conditions, but requests, assumptions that were made, and requests from the community, and Councillor McMahon and I moved all of those forward. That had to do with local services being provided to the clients. That was including health services, wellness services, recreation services, and for the surrounding community to have the parks upgraded, particularly Maple Leaf Forever Park, because it's right there. There'll be 60 new people. At the time, there'll be 100 new people moving in. There'll be 60 to 80 new people that will be beside the shelter, beside the park. There's probably some lighting requirements. There's actually the Maple Leaf Forever Cottage, Alexander Muir's home, which should be upgraded, but it was not put on the list. Lighting. The Apple Grove Community Center is right there. It's one of our grade A AUKs, and they and Eastview were named to look at certain types of programming that they could deliver to assist these clients. And it was, I think, in response to a lot of trepidation that the community had at the time, and they were welcomed the fact that we were looking at this resource model and making sure that there were a lot of things to do for the clients in the shelter. Since then, we've passed our new recommendations about shelters, and definitely there's a new approach of having many things for people to do in a shelter during the day. It will be open all day. There will be job search. There will be recreation programs. We're looking at the libraries. There'll be South Riverdale Community Health Center. But what was noted by the Community Liaison Committee, which is a very strong committee, was that the city, at the same time as citing the shelter, ended up closing the pool. And I know it's two different divisions, but they thought that was a very short-sighted thing to do. In particular, that pool has time where there could be twice a week when it was being run by S.H. Armstrong, which could have been devoted to clients at the shelter. I know there are other community centers, like the Harrison Baths and other places that are really important for a community to come together. They're used by those who are clients in our shelters, and to think that somehow they aren't residents and that they shouldn't be offered a discrete program in the city is a problem. So they're very strong in the East End about making sure that we haven't lost something that could benefit these new residents. And I would like to see what that would cost and see how we might be able to reinstate that programming. We also have the pool working group that was set up by council at the same time as closing that pool, and it's going to be reporting in June as well, in order to try to find a way to keep that open. And I will note for members of this committee that it was a 69.4% utilization rate that closed that pool when it was supposed to have a 70%. They're now at 89% in that community pool. And there have been many, many, many new condos that have been approved in the East End. So far, there was not a demographic study that has been undertaken to kind of show the number of young families that are there that would require these types of resources. So I think we should look at the costing of reopening this pool before we have to actually build a brand new community center, because that will be the next motion, given the number of people that are moving in. There are wait lists. It's time that we think about this as an integrated resource in the East End for everybody. And with this motion, it includes including those who are using our shelters and also the surrounding community. So I'd like to have your support for this motion with this request today.
Councillor Cressy, is a question for the mover to speak? I have a question for the mover, if I could just quickly ask. I understand programs continue to operate at S.H. Armstrong. Is that
No,
correct?
I'm going to say this, that's the biggest fallacy that is out there. That is absolutely incorrect. There are no community-based programs at S.H. Armstrong. Throughout the whole budget debate, that is what people were told. There will still be programs at S.H. Armstrong. There are programs at Duke of Connaught School only for those children who attend that school, not for the surrounding community. As a matter of fact, this community center is not in my ward. The school is not in the ward of the trustee in my ward. It is in Beaches, East York, but all of the constituents from my area who use the community programming go to S.H. Armstrong. So I'm very concerned to hear that again. And I heard that over and over and over again. I don't know where that started, Mr. Chair, but it's very concerning to me to hear that there are somehow this S.H. Armstrong pool is open. The S.H. Armstrong pool programming will be closed on July 1st.
So it is still operating?
It is operating with the
Okay,
closure date. That's correct.
Councillor, with
I'm
all due
sorry.
respect,
My
that was my
apologies.
question.
You set off me on the, that somehow, yes, it's operating till July 1st.
Okay, thank you, because this is written as if it's closed now.
It is set to close. Council voted to close it in 2017. as we know, on the basis that there was pool programming that would still be available. And I'm making the point, there is no pool programming available to the community. I'd also advise you there are 1,200 condos approved or in building on Queen Street East, and I believe this is the only place where there has been a resource removed in an area of great intensification. So unless you'd like to move that we just simply don't close it on July 1st, which I would be happy if you would make that motion, Mr. Chair, and send that to council, but I think I'd like to proceed in this way, know what those
All right, thank you, Councillor Fletcher. I simply asked whether programs are still operating,
And I
and
simply
through all
gave
of
you
that,
my
they are.
answer. Up until July the 1st.
That's
At
fair.
which point, there will be no community
Fair enough, we
program.
should have probably written this differently. Any other questions for the mover?
Happy
No?
to have an amendment.
Speakers? Councillor Cressy?
Well, just very, very briefly, I think if more people live in a neighborhood, you need more infrastructure and services to support the people in the neighborhood. And, you know, it's pretty straightforward to me. And that goes for social infrastructure, whether it's pools and parks and community facilities, and it goes for hard infrastructure, whether it's lighting and hydro and road capacity. And I think this motion, in building on the strong work that's been done around Hope Shelter, but recognizing it is an even bigger issue along this corridor, makes sense, and I'm happy to support it.
Councillor Mahavik?
I think this is now almost becoming the standard by which we assess shelters, where they go, and what kind of resources they need around. Like, we recognize we support shelters, we support shelters across the city, but it's about the infrastructure, the social infrastructure that needs to accompany those shelters. We did the same thing with Cornerstone. We were just talking about that with Councillor Wong Tam, and of course we need to do it here. My only little question with this is the June meeting of CDNR, I'm not sure whether staff, have you talked to staff about whether they can actually, it's fine, okay. It's okay, I'm getting signals that it's fine, okay. Or I think it's, okay, fine, noting that the reports are almost due in a week or so, but whatever. I think to make the statement, I think is a very important one, to make sure that the right infrastructure accompanies any new shelters.
Okay, this is simply a report back to our June meeting. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. The last item is item number 6, Councillor Mahavik. This is the item we held down. You were preparing a motion.
Yep. It's
funding allocations for shelter and related services. Is that motion ready?
yes, it is, and it's been.
Right, let's put it on the screen, take a look.
May I add, if you need to hear it, staff have supported this and have helped me with some of the wording. Basically, it is to, in future reports, to look at the flex bed capacity. And that is so that when they do negotiations with a service provider, let's say a Fred Victor or whomever, that they do a base contract, they obviously do a base contract, but then when we have that surge in the wintertime, so that we ask them to identify, okay, if push comes to shove, what else can you do? And to report that out on an annual basis. Number 2, asked basically to do that same piece of work, but for 2017/18, they have a report coming in the fall on their winter readiness, and that will help us to identify that flex bed capacity in our general effort to basically keep capacity strong so that we don't break that 90% target that we have set for ourselves. And the third one is you know, if you've been here around here for a long time, there is a growing discrepancy between the wages paid in not-for-profit run shelters and public city hall run shelters. And so to develop strategies on ways to address that discrepancy, I think helps the young people who are coming out of universities and community colleges who are looking for positions so that they don't have to go, frankly, into poverty wages to do very, very good work. So that's what number 3 tries to do.
Thank you, Councillor Mahavik. There doesn't seem to be a timeline on when this information is to be brought back.
Number one is future reports, so I wouldn't see that one coming frankly for a year. Number two is coming as they have a winter readiness program, a report that's coming in the fall. And number three is the budget submissions to the city that is being prepared. I think it's due, if I'm reading the executive committee right, in October, but
So you want this information embedded in future reports that we
Correct.
customarily get? Okay,
We don't need
fine,
to-
fair enough. No harm here. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. The item is amended. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. I think we're done. Yep. No, thank you very much. We'll see you in June, if not before. We're adjourned.